Okay. Hi, welcome to Community Conversations. Thank you for finding the classroom. I know today's been a bit of a challenge with a very packed house at LCC today, but I'm very happy to have you here, and I'm very happy to welcome a new speaker in our Community Conversations series. Taryn Williams graduated from Kelso High School, is an LCC alum, and earned her bachelor's degree in history, yay, from Washington State University. She's been part of the outreach department at LCC for the past 3 years and is committed to supporting students in reaching their educational goals. She is passionate about reading, Hosier, and a good conspiracy theory or two. Please welcome Taryn Williams.
Okay, I'm gonna try. I'm probably gonna have to hold my little microphone buddy. He's gonna have to be real close in person to me. Good morning, everybody. Yes, thank you for coming, even though I know parking is kind of atrocious right now. There are so many events going on. As Courtney said, I'm a part of the outreach team. So prior to this, I was standing out under that blue tent by the front of HSB directing about 400 students to our Chamber of Commerce Career Fair happening right now. So I apologize if I get a little winded. I've been running back and forth all day. So we're going to talk about William Shakespeare and the authorship question. The title of my slide, Will the Real Shakespeare Please Stand Up? And we're going to start with a little bit of a backstory on how I got to where I am with this. If I can get technology to work with me. There we go. So how it all started is that 10 years ago, I transferred from LCC to WSU and took English 205, which was Intro to Shakespeare. I had never encountered the authorship question prior to that, but I did have the pleasure of taking the class with my close friend, Meher. She's here, and we both got to learn about the authorship question during that time. The class was challenging, engaging, and something I still look back on fondly today. It almost had me switch my degree to English. Almost. I didn't commit to that. I still graduated with my bachelor's degree in history. I had never considered the idea prior to this class that William Shakespeare hadn't written his own plays, or in fact was written by another author. So as any good conspiracy theory starts, it begins with a lifelong addiction of trying to find the truth. Here's the problem. You can blame Michael Delahoyd, Dr. Michael Delahoyd from WSU for this. He started this problem. As you can see pictured here, it is his edition of the William Shakespeare Antony and Cleopatra. He edited, introduced, and fully annotated the story from an Oxfordian lens, which spoiler alert for the end. And he also signed the copy of the book that I received back in 2016. So you can blame all of him for why you're here today. So let's get started about this. We're going to break this down into three separate groups, excuse me. It's going to be the myth, the man, and the legend. And I know that the saying is the man, the myth, the legend, but that didn't fit for my purposes. So we're going to go with the way I want to do it today. We'll talk about William Shakespeare and the things that we've been told. We'll talk about William Shakespeare and the evidence we have. And then we'll also go into the legends and the truths that we seek. So beginning with the myth, William Shakespeare was born in 1564 in Stratford. He was a literary genius of the Elizabethan period. His works have been represented across all forms of media for hundreds of years now. He wrote a total of 38 plays, 154 sonnets, and a few other musings. The man is boasted to have the one of the best I apologize. I'm kind of lost on my having to do all the tours was a little bit not great planning on my part. So let's pour into the man. This is where things start to get suspicious. After William Shakespeare's death, scholars expected to find journals, manuscripts, letters, something, anything to prove that William of Stratford was the towering literary figure that he was. But they didn't really find much. He's known up on the screen as 6 signatures that he gave. In these signatures, because fun fact, during the Elizabethan era, spelling was not consistent and was more based on what you heard. So you would spell a word the way you heard it, not necessarily in the correct form of it. So in these signatures, which I know it's kind of hard to see, um, he doesn't have an E in between the K and the S. So it's really spelled Shakespeare here, which is why I mentioned William Shakespeare. So there's no definitive proof that he attended the local school, had any books or poetry, and we find more grain inventories, court documents, and other legal disputes than we do find any true evidence during his lifetime of having produced plays, sonnets, and other things. Even as far back as the 18th century, Reverend Wilmot, who lived near Stratford, couldn't reconcile the man described in local records with the brilliance of Shakespeare's works, so he came to a bold conclusion. Somebody else wrote them. Just some more information. The Stratford Grammar School actually doesn't have any evidence to suggest that Shakespeare attended while he was in school. Of school age, which would have been normal. There was no truancy back then, so nobody was forcing any students to go to school. So now let's get to the legends. And I would be bemused not to offer the other legends their time. We have Charles Marlowe. He is a colorful man. He is known to have been a spy, supposedly stabbed to death in 1593, and some believe that his death was staged and that he went underground in Europe to keep writing. But when we compare his existing works to Shakespeare's, the tone and linguistic patterns just don't line up. And Francis Bacon here, his followers believe he embedded a secret code in Shakespeare's works to reveal himself to be the author, but no one has ever really cracked this code to prove it in any credible way. Plus, his essays that exist now show a very different voice and attitude toward performance than what we see in some of Shakespeare's plays, such as Hamlet. There's other information up on the screen that kind of goes over the different things about them. And now we get to the legend, who I am going to try and convince you is the true author of the Shakespeare plays. This is the 17th Earl of Oxford, Edward de Vere. The Oxfordian theory gets its name from this gentleman. Edward de Vere, his life reads something like a Shakespeare play. Orphaned at a young age, raised in a powerful political household, and celebrated for his wit and writing. And he also has extensive travels in Italy, which would later come in to be one of the most common settings for many of Shakespeare's plays and other works. He was adored in a controversial creature in equal measures, called the Italianite Englishman for his flair and love of Italian culture. When we look closely, the plays seem to be almost autobiographical. Themes of illegitimacy, court intrigue, and forbidden love echo moments in de Vere's life. Even A Midsummer Night's Dream contains a reference that may hint at a personal connection to the Queen. These parallels don't prove authorship outright, but they are a coincidence that is increasingly hard to ignore. And there are going to be three theories that we'll go over. Bless you. These are going to be called the Prince Tudor theories. There are three of them, and I have left one of them off the screen to kind of create a little bit more intrigue, a little bit more mystery, right? So the first theory we're going to go over is the sun. This is Prince Tudor theory 1, that the Queen was not actually so chaste in her life, and is widely rumored to have many so-called favorites during her reign. These were men she surrounded herself with at court, who were more than just advisors. And according to several theories, the Virgin Queen may not have been so virginal after all, even the last of the Tudor bloodline. The theory states that Elizabeth had a secret son with Thomas Seymour, who was one of her favorites, and that child was Edward de Vere. The photo I have up on the screen right now, it is titled A Portrait of an Unknown Woman, but it has been proposed to be Queen Elizabeth, clearly pregnant. And there were many times in her reign where she would take extensive breaks and go to other castles and other places. And then she'd come back and be like, oh, nothing happened. I just needed a break. nothing serious. I was just gone for several weeks. Don't ask questions. The second theory is that Edward de Vere was one of her, and he was documented as being one of her favorites, but one of her lovers. And that he actually also had a son with her, Henry Worsley, of who was the Earl of Southampton. This would explain why so many of his works were written under another pen, because if he were to publicly uh, publish these, that would be explosive politically and put a very big warning sign over his head and potentially get him arrested or even killed. I mean, we saw how Elizabeth's father was. She could also be that way. And I know the suspense is killing all of you. Let's go to the third theory. Drum roll. Both. I know that's a really big thing to stomach, and I will be totally honest with you. There's not a lot of sources that a lot of Exfordian sources that support this. It actually is more supported. Like I said, Michael Delahoyd was one of my sources, Dr. Delahoyd. I went to a presentation that he gave in March of 2016, and he discussed his own theories and how he thinks a lot of the writings that come across more as like Shakespeare being a man who loved other men was him actually writing to his son in a very fatherly manner, in a way that he couldn't express otherwise. Because if you have a son with a virgin queen, you can't really talk about that one. So I know that this sounds like a soap opera. I understand that. But this is one of the most persistent and fascinating theories of the authorship debate. The Prince Tudor theories suggest that Elizabeth's private life wasn't as chaste as history claims, and that Shakespeare's plays were are coded political dramas about her her reign and legacy. This topic, like I said, is considered taboo even for Exfordians. So the information on this is difficult to find, which is why the only source I have for this is Dr. Michael Delahoyd in a lecture he presented on March 11th in 2016, which I know is a long time, but like I said, I've been on this route for 10 years, so you got to go down this journey with me. So this is all to say, I think there's a little bit of Shakespeare in all of us. And mysteries and theatrics aside, why does it matter? De Vere's life fits the timeline, the style, and the subject matter of the plays. He had the education, motivation to remain anonymous. Meanwhile, William Stratford was conveniently provided a name, a face, and a cover. The pushback from academia has been fierce. Questioning Shakespeare's authorship has been called elitist, unorthodox, and even heretical. Professor Stanley Wells, one of the leading Stratfordian scholars, describes it as dangerous, especially because it encourages students to question what's accepted as historical fact. But history isn't a museum piece, it evolves. Every discovery, every new document, every reinterpretation changes what we think that we know. To forbid questions is to shut the door on learning itself. To think is to question, and to question is to be. Even if the authorship question is never fully solved, the value lies in the search. History is not a concrete thing. It breathes, it changes, and it invites us to look deeper. Accepting everything at face value stops that process. Questioning isn't dangerous. It's what education is built on. So whether you walk out of here a Stratfordian, an Oxfordian, or just curious, I hope I keep you asking questions, because thinking is what keeps us all alive. And then these are my references. And I also have a sheet of paper of my references if you guys have any questions or want to dive any deeper. I also encourage you, if you do like a good drama movie, there is a movie based on this theory. It's called The Authorship. And it's a beautiful movie with wonderful actors in it. So if you ever want to dive into it a little bit deeper with a little bit more of a dramatic flair, that is where I will point you. I also have the Anthony and Cleopatra copy if you guys want to peruse that. And if you have any questions, I would be happy to answer them. Yes, it's.
So do we have any questions?
Yes, it's the authorship. I can pull up a picture of it if you'd like. Oh, okay. Yeah.
So when you talk about how this is sort of rife with controversy, so this is not sort of mainstream, as you will. This is sort of a challenge to the existing orthodoxy of Shakespeare.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Coming around.
Anonymous. I apologize. It's called Anonymous. That was sorry. Yeah, that's what the cover of it will look like. No, it's a movie. Yeah. The question was, is this on Netflix? I think it's actually on Amazon Prime. I have not been successful at finding it on Netflix. Yeah.
Hi. Do you have any thoughts on Elizabeth Winkler's book, Shakespeare Was a Woman, and her theories? She ends up being an Oxfordian, but she floats this theory that Shakespeare was a woman.
I have not read that one. However, I have heard of that theory, and I've actually heard the theory that Queen Elizabeth I was Shakespeare and used the pseudonym as a way to express some of her feelings about court and the intrigue around that. But I love that idea. that, yeah.
Are there any other questions? Oh, yes, one more.
General, with the, like say Oxford, Cambridge, Oxford, and the general academic grouping in England particularly, do they accept that Shakespeare is William Shakespeare, or is it this conspiracy theory a little more widespread throughout academia?
It is widespread. However, in England, I know there's a lot of pushback. The woman I showed on my first photo that was with me in front of the WSU sign, she was actually a student that studied abroad. She was from England, and I reached out to her and I told her I was doing this. I don't know if she joined Zoom. I kind of, but I invited her to. But when I told her, she was like, "Oh, I can't wait. I don't believe it." And I was like, "Oh," but no, a lot of academia, from what I have found in my own research, it's kind of a taboo topic to suggest that William Shakespeare was not the real author. Yeah. Yeah. They are vested. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, arguably, there's a whole industry, like tourist industry around Stratford and things like that. And so that's, I mean, I've heard like the Francis Bacon theory and all sorts of other stuff, and people don't like that stuff.
No, yeah. And yeah, if you that kind of like you said, it messes with tourism, and that can mess with money, which is what it always comes down to.
Okay, all right, coming around for a question.
This is just another clarification, but you toward the end you said history is not something, and I didn't get the whole quote.
History is not concrete.
Not concrete. Yeah. Do you believe that?
Absolutely. I think that history and what we understand of it can change with new information that comes out. Like I said, Dr. Delahoyd almost convinced me to go in to be an English major, but history is just too fun. It's such a living and breathing thing. And actually, I was a student at LCC and took one of Courtney's classes, and she's the reason I stayed a history major, because she makes it a living, breathing thing that is able to ebb and flow and change as we find out more information.
Thank you. And I'll back you up and say, yes, history does change as we get more information. Kind of like science does. If you have more information, if you get more evidence, you need to alter your perceptions. And so while I don't know if I believe this, I definitely know of times we've had to change our orthodoxy of thinking with history because new evidence has come to light. Yeah.
And with new evidence coming to light, there's also newly discovered portrait that they believe to be a new portrait of William Shakespeare as well. I haven't gotten to dive into that as much. I saw it last night when I was reviewing my slides. Oh, a fun fact. I thought I had written a paper on this when I was in college. It's much more eloquent. It's also 10 pages long. And I was reviewing it and I was going through my old documents and I found a folder in my computer titled Shakespeare. And I found out that I had done a presentation on this back in college that I had completely forgotten about. And it was really funny to me because it was set up in the exact same way. So apparently I did not learn new tricks. I just remembered them in the far recesses of my mind.
I just wanted to add that history evolves, but it also depends on who writes it and that particular event.
Absolutely, history does. History, that what's the quote? History is written by the victors. Yes. And that can also change when you finally get somebody else's perspective into the room and into the conversation.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you all for joining us here today. And I want to thank Taryn for sharing her knowledge with us and invite you back next week. We're going to be back in HSB 101. So please join us again next week for Mary Stone's Silent Pleas, The Making of a Mystery. Please join us again then. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.